children. Welcome back to my dining room, where I'm going to go over the Industrial Revolution. Let's start with what was going on before the revolution. Okay, so before society like it is today, many people had small family businesses or they ran small farms, and a lot of people lived in very rural areas. Remember, rural means like the countryside. If you needed a new shirt, well, guess what? You had to make it yourself. Well, actually, your mom was probably gonna make it, or your sister. Unless you're a girl, then you'd probably make your own. And if your father's a farmer and you're a boy, you're probably a farmer. If your father's a blacksmith and you're a boy, you're probably gonna be a blacksmith too. So, in the 1800s, there's gonna be a huge shift from small town living, agricultural living, to big city industrialized ways of life. And that's gonna come with a multitude of new advances, and with advances comes brand new problems. But don't worry, I'll start with the advances and all the good things before I get into the dark, scary parts of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution starts in Great Britain, and then it's going to spread throughout Europe and eventually come overseas and get us over here. During the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, you're going to have three categories of change. First is technological changes, the second is going to be economical changes, and the third is going to be social changes in society. All right, so let's kind of go over the changes of technology first. The first is going to be the use of steel and iron, especially when making structures. So you're gonna start to see buildings being built higher and taller because we have stronger materials to make the buildings outside of just wood and bricks. We are also going to see new immersions of different types of energy. So we now have electricity, we're going to start using steam engines, and we also have the use of petroleum, which is new. And then when it comes to our manufacturing, there's a couple of new inventions that are going to help Great Britain become a powerhouse in textiles. Textiles are fabrics. So there's the spinning jenny, and then there's also the power loom. So before you had to weave the threads yourself and like do the whole loom thing, and now you just feed it through the machine and it does the work for you. Much quicker, much more efficient, and therefore you can make more money. There's also going to be the start of new inventions in communication. You're gonna see the telegraph, with like the Morse code, where it's like boop, 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 boop. Yeah. And then that's going to lead to the invention of the telephone, and you're gonna see the invention of the radio come up. You're also going to start seeing new modes of transportation. So like I said, we have the locomotive, we got that steam engine, which is gonna lead to people learning how to make cars, and then it's gonna lead to people learning how to make planes, and that's it. All right, now economically speaking, we're going to have a redistribution of wealth. So before, it was based only on how much land you owned, and that's gonna all change. You're also going to see more international trade. So people are starting to trade with other countries quicker and more often because they have better and more goods to trade. You're also going to see a shift in the power of different countries based on how much economic and industrial power they have. So Great Britain, though they've been pretty strong until now, are even stronger because of their economic power, adding to their military power. All right, now let's talk about societal changes. First thing is you're going to see a shift of people living in their nice little cozy towns and moving into the big cities. These cities are gonna get super overpacked, they're gonna get dirty, they're gonna be dangerous. We'll get to that. Then you have the emergence of a new class. So you used to have upper class, lower class, you had the clergy in there somewhere, but now we have the new middle class, or the working class. This is going to show up the first time during the Industrial Revolution, which means you're also going to see working class movements, because all these people are gonna realize like, hey, we deserve some rights, give us some rights, and they're gonna have movements to get these rights. You know what I'm saying? You're also gonna see a shift from people being really specialized, and for example, like somebody who works with a specific tool with their hands, they're now going to be machine operators. Okay, so in Great Britain, if you've ever been there, there's sheep everywhere, which means it's the perfect place for a textile industry to start. Once they master being able to make textiles quick and efficiently, they start to kind of dabble with other things like furniture, weapons, building materials, you name it. I mean, anything. So not only did England have all the sheepies in the world to make textiles, they're also importing food from new places, which means their food is becoming more stable, which means that populations are growing, and which means people are starting to have more time to kind of think of other, new, better ways of doing things, which is how inventions are created. Something to keep in mind about England being the first industrial country is that they got a lot of their influence from the way that textiles were made in China and Japan. All right, now let's get into how these big factories ran. Unfortunately, at this time, the success of a business was about 50%. So if you're somebody who's running one of these businesses, you're trying to keep costs low. What's an easy way to keep costs low? Your labor. So, no, they didn't use slaves, but they did take orphans from the government and make them work in the factories. Not better. Now remember, this is the early phases of the Industrial Revolution, so we don't really know yet how dangerous these machines are. And you got a bunch of little orphan children running around the factory, running these big machines, and so there's going to be a frequent number of injuries and deaths, and a lot happened to these children. So not only was like the factory itself dangerous, but these kids are working ungodly hours. I mean, you go to school for what, 7 hours a day, and it feels pretty painful. So now imagine working at a factory for 14 hours straight with maybe a 10-minute break. Yeah. Now, to shed light on how gruesome these accidents can be, I'm gonna read you a little quote. Here we go. Little Mary Richards was caught up in a machine, and the witnesses alongside her said, bones of her arms, legs, thighs, and etc. successively snap. Her head appeared dashed to pieces, her blood thrown about like water from a twirled mop. I know that was kind of graphic and did not paint a pretty picture, but it gives you the idea of how oppressive working in a factory could be, especially for a child. However, at the time, the owners of the factories were more concerned about making a pretty penny than making sure all their workers were safe. So I know I said that they didn't exactly use slaves in the factories, but the beginning of the Industrial Revolution is going to contribute to the increase of the slave trade, and that is because all these people are leaving their farms to move to the city, and they need someone to replace all those people from the farms, so they're going to use slaves. Also, in order to make manufactured goods, you need natural resources, so you need people to be foremen. Unfortunately, it's the 1700s, slavery was the go-to. I think it's important to understand that the Industrial Revolution really thrived because of slave labor, as well as child labor, and even the labor of women, because they were able to be paid less than men. Now I'm gonna shift into something a little lighter and talk about the invention of the steam engine, which is going to allow a lot of the things that were being invented and just used human strength to be built are now able to be built by machines. As the steam engine is invented, you're also getting the use of the locomotive, which is going to be the choo-choo train, okay? Now, instead of having to carry things through covered wagons or horse-drawn carriages like that, you can just load everything onto one train and ship it across the country. It's going to be a lot faster and a lot more efficient, which means that you can trade more faster, which means you're making more money. Okay, now I'm going to explain how something like the invention of the railway is going to lead to an increase of city populations, okay? So your railways and your trains are going to have to stop in certain city ports in order for things to be loaded and unloaded. Now, you're going to have what's called primary and secondary jobs. So primary jobs are people who are actually running the train. The secondary jobs are going to be people like station masters, conductors, And then you're gonna need people to run the shops in those city ports where the trains stop for all the people to put their goods in. You're gonna need pharmacists for the people who are living there. You're gonna need construction workers. You're gonna need teachers, and then you're gonna need doctors. You're gonna need drivers and coaches, and then you're gonna need sanitation workers to make sure everything stays clean. You're gonna need police officers to make sure everyone follows the rules. You're gonna need administrators, like you're gonna need somebody to run the towns. You know, a lot of jobs come with industrialization. I mean, these are all jobs that still exist today. Hello? Let's get into the societal changes, shall we? You're gonna have the emergence of a couple of new social classes. You're gonna have the working class, middle class. Working class, factory workers. Middle class, all your other workers, that's gonna be your teachers, doctors, lawyers, what have you. There's also gonna be a change in women's roles. So before, women were expected to be on the farm, weave the little weaving machines, do housework, and now women are working in the factories, and some are even working in places like coal mines. Look at that. Now, even though women were able to have all these jobs and have a little bit of economic freedom, the ideology at the time was still for the women to be like angels of the house and be like the perfect wife and mother, even though it was near impossible unless you came from money. So now, women are able to work, but the cultural norm discourages women from working, but they can't afford to do anything but work. But if they work, they're looked at as lower class, but most people are in the working class, so women just can't win. Another change in society is going to be the start of clubs from these factories. So these different groups, like the engineers or the civil service workers, are going to create their own clubs and teams. So you might have an engineering soccer team. So we've got all these people, new classes are forming. They're no longer living in the rural areas, they're all living in the cities. So let's talk about the condition of the cities. Populations are going to grow exponentially. For example, in 1750, Manchester, England had about 20,000 people, which is the size of a small suburb in Chicago. Then by 1850, you're gonna have about 400,000 people. That's a lot of people within 100 years. The living conditions of Manchester were absolutely disgusting. You're gonna have the start of these slums. You're gonna see people living in tenements. Tenements are like really poorly built, smushed together apartments. So think of living in a 1-bedroom or 1-room apartment with like 6 of your family members and maybe sharing a bathroom with everybody who lived on the floor. It's not a good time. And the city of Manchester is gonna grow so fast that they didn't really have a good way to plan how to keep it sanitary. So people are putting animal excrement on the streets, they're putting sewage and garbage on the streets, and the streets are already muddy because they're not paved. So it's just, basically the streets are just a bunch of slop. And if that's what's on the streets, imagine what the air smelled like all the time. And though I just described Manchester, other industrial cities were not much better. So there you have it. People are going from small farms and doing everything, every little job that you need done on your own in your own household, to these massive manufacturing plants and factories to create everything you could possibly need. Your people are moving to these nasty cities. The pollution is running rampant. But you know, countries become wealthier, people become wealthier, and we kind of formed the lifestyle that we have today. I mean, you think I weaved this shirt? No, I bought it online and had it shipped and delivered to my house. All I had to do was this. That's it. And that's because of the Industrial Revolution. So here's my question. What do you think is the biggest impact on today's society from the Industrial Revolution? And do you think the Industrial Revolution is over, or is it still going? What do you think? I might do a quick video about imperialism if I'm feeling ambitious. But I might just jump to the world wars because honestly, this is my class and I can teach what I want. So I Okay, bye.